Okay, just getting live here. This is actually our last live stream for the year. It looks like we'll be doing. I think our next live stream is going to be on January 2nd. So this is going to be the technically the last one that we do this year, and of course the last one before Christmas, as I said, I think in the title. So it's just good to have get it out there. And again, it's an Ask Me Anything. So if you have any questions, make sure that that you put the comments into the live chat. You'll see it on the side of your screen there or down below, depending on how you have it set up. And just make sure you say @WeTheGoverned so I can see that it's a question, because I know a lot of times there's commentary on the live stream, and it's hard for me to distinguish comments from questions unless you do something like that. So just a quick little update before I get to any questions that you might have. And right now I don't have any, so that's a good way to start out. Usually I have some that have popped in early, but just a quick update on a couple of things. Some of you probably saw the parody video that we just put out. I'm kind of excited about that. Abby London, it's just a great singer, and it's really fun to do parody videos. I actually love parody videos. I've been wanting to do some for a while. So that was kind of the first foray. I've actually got another one in the can that I'd recorded. It's actually a couple years ago, I think now, that we never really totally finished. So I might go back and, Carrie, if you're out there, I haven't forgotten about it. And I might try to go back and get that one solved if I can, and finish putting that one together as well. But parody videos, I think, they're fun to do, and they're good to get out there. The other thing I wanted to mention to just frequent viewers, you might have noticed that I've recently launched a interview that I did with Semi Bird, and a lot of people have been asking me pretty much all year to interview Semi Bird. I don't usually do that many interviews with politicians, particularly if they're in the middle of a crowded primary, and there's a number of them in the primary. So I did make an exception in this case. So I interviewed Semi Bird, and just to be fair, I've also extended an invitation then to the other Republican candidate, Dave Reichert, if he's interested in doing an interview. So I may end up doing an interview with him as well before the primary comes around in August. So it really has more to do with scheduling. I'm not an easy person to do. It's not something, I'm set up to do interviews, but I don't do a lot of them. So there's a little bit more planning that's involved in trying to organize those. So I'm interested in your thoughts on the interview, whether you thought it was useful or not. One of the things when I'm doing these interviews, I'm not trying to play gotcha. I'm mostly just trying to give an opportunity for people to see the candidate or the politician and in basically their own words, how they feel about things or their campaign or why they're running for office or whatever. Because the one challenge, as somebody who's run for office before, I know this, if you're trying to get out there and describe who you are, in most settings, you just have a very limited amount of time to discuss anything. 3 minutes at the average presentation that you do at a public setting. Sometimes you're the main speaker and you get about 15 or 20 minutes if you're lucky. But if you're running for governor or running for a statewide office, sometimes I think debates, which we have very few of in the state, and also just interviews where you can actually have a little bit more of a long-form conversation for, I think, the voters to be able to see you. I think it's an important option for us to consider. So I'm hoping that I can do more of those this next year. It really depends on resources and time, but I'd like to do some more. And so I just published the Semi Bird video. We actually recorded it last week, as I said, I think in the description, but we just got it up today. So that's another video that's out there as well. I did record 2 videos today that will launch as soon as possible this week. I kind of want to get them out there before Christmas, but one of them is just a quick update video on the Let's Go Washington situation. We'll probably talk about that a little bit. I know I discussed a little bit in the last live stream that I did last week, but I wanted to just give a little bit more of an update. We're coming down to the end of the signature gathering window, and the drama on the left is just endless. I mean, they seem to be in complete and total panic mode right now, and every day it just gets more surreal when you see how freaked out they are about these initiatives. And so that's I think that's worth discussing. The other thing I did, and some people out there had reached out to me about Mason County Fire District number 12. I know that you have. I'd received a couple emails. I get tons of these emails all the time about different corruption stories. And I hadn't followed up on that much until last Friday when I went out to Mason County and had a chance to go over just the whole fiasco, the recall election, the state fraud investigation from the state auditor's office, all the other drama that kind of has gone into what's gone on out there. If you live in Mason County, I am sorry that you have had to go through that. It's very clear to me that you really dealt with something that was a complete disaster. And really, at this point in time, it looks to me like all levels of government have let you down in many ways. And in fact, the only thing that seems to be changing the process are the citizens who are basically engaging themselves in not just the recall effort, but in doing the records requests and in tracking all the fraud and the theft and everything else that's been going on out there. So hopefully I did it justice. I did a little bit more of a traditional long-form video like I do sometimes, and after reading those reports, looking at some of the public hearings and just some of the other, just the countless, the records requests that are involved in that, which there was a ton of work on that. I was very impressed with everything that you guys did out there in Mason County. And again, just to repeat myself, I'm sorry you had to go through it because it looks like a complete disaster. I'm very used to seeing people steal our taxpayer dollars, right? They do it all the time. Olympia has a ton of grant grifting operations going on. So does Seattle, so does Bellingham, Spokane, bigger areas in the state, in particular higher population density. A lot of money is getting stolen or being misappropriated in one way or another. Most of the time, they're a little bit smarter, though. They aren't as it's just a clown show out in Mason County. So every now and then you need a little bit of comic relief. Not that it's kind of a dark humor, but it's nice to at least be able to dig into the craziness that's going on out there and do a good little fraud story. So hopefully that video will get out as quick as possible and get that up before Christmas. Nothing says Christmas more than a nice fraud story about government doing what it does best, which is squander your money and your resources and providing very little in return. So anyway, I thought that was good. This isn't Ask Me Anything. I will get to some of your questions if you get them up here. And I just definitely appreciate those questions, and hopefully I can answer a few of those for you as well. I also told myself in the past, and you've asked for me to occasionally give you updates on where I'm going to be at different times. And I think last time I mentioned, at this point in time, I'm planning to be the MC for March 2nd, Lewis County Republicans, which their Lincoln Day dinner. And March 9th, the next weekend, I'll be out in Kitsap County for their Lincoln Day dinner, co-MC out there. I did that last year, I think, in both cases. And I think this is the third year in a row for me to do that in Lewis County, which is really close to me. So it's easy for me to do that. Let me know if you are an organizer of one of these events, you need me to come out and speak, or do any other activity. I think also I try to get out there if I can. January 8th, I believe, I'm going to be at the Douglas Chelan Women's Republican Club out in Wenatchee. I think it's their luncheon that I'm doing that day. So that's probably the next event that I'll be at officially. And I may be doing a kind of an appearance in Carrie Condada's show out in Wenatchee on Wednesday in a couple days. I don't know if I've got that organized properly, so if I do and I don't screw it up, then I should be out there on Wednesday to do a quick show with him. I'm not sure when he broadcasts that, but I'll probably be getting it recorded anyway Wednesday. But most people probably don't want to hear about that. This is coming up to the Christmas time, New Year's. I'm hoping that all of you are having and preparing for a good Christmas out there, and that it's going well. And I think with that, I'm going to get to some of these questions, and we'll see if I can answer some of your questions. Ask me anything, and we'll see what you have to say here. Distinctive, nice parody video. I saw it, and it was good. Thank you. Always appreciate that. I love the parody videos. It's one of my favorite things to do. I love watching them, so it's fun to be able to produce one. And I think I can do. Abby was great in her singing. I think I can do a better job in organizing. But honestly, we did that in like a couple days. So that was a very quick one that we put out just in time for Christmas. For some reason, Bob Ferguson doesn't like that video very much. And if you haven't seen it, go to the channel and go to the Ho 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 Merry Christmas Bob Ferguson edition. Jeff, you got a question here. What's the gains? I think you mean capital gains tax initiative is what you're asking here. And that is actually one of the initiatives that is going to be turned in this Thursday. This point in time, Let's Go Washington people have made a formal schedule 1:30 on Thursday at the Secretary of State's office. It's not super secret. It's a public record. That's when they have to go turn them in. And I believe they're turning in actually two different initiatives that day. It's the capital gains tax, repeal the capital gains tax, but it's also the no income tax initiative, all the two of them at the same time. So they have the signatures for both of those. I believe the no income tax one, there's a massive amount of signatures for that one. In addition, I would anticipate that they'll also be turning in initiatives for the other three that have already been turned in. And I will be there. So if you're going to be there at 1:30 at Israel Road at the Secretary of State's office, same place they've had to submit the last three initiatives, you'll get to see 2 for 1 if you want to show up 1:30 on Thursday. I know we're getting close to Christmas, but it's the 21st, and why not? It is kind of this culmination of the largest conservative signature gathering effort in the history of the state. So it never hurts to be there and see it for yourself. It's kind of fun there'll be a lot of boxes to put in the metal carts, and it's just good to see where it's going. Critical Conservative, you got a question. Do you know Semi-Bird's thoughts on ballot harvesting? Good question. That is not a question I asked him when he was here, and I don't think that's actually anything I've ever even talked to him about. I'll tell you that generally the majority of people on our side of the equation, the liberty freedom side of the equation, we don't like ballot harvesting. At the same time, that's the rules that's allowed under the rules that we operate in our state. So ballot harvesting is perfectly legal. Ballot harvesting being defined as not you filling out somebody else's ballot. That's still, even in Washington state, that's illegal still. But it would be about collecting ballots other people have filled out and delivering them yourself to the auditor's office. So in other words, they lose chain of custody, they give it to you, you collect them all, and they're trusting that you're going to go and deliver them to the auditor's office. The left does this all the time. They've been doing it for decades. And it is explicitly allowed in Washington state. So you're certainly allowed to go do this. They also do ballot, like fill-in ballot days, or you fill your ballot out day, where they're all there. And these, this is a scam, I think, that the left does. They take a lot of your taxpayer dollars, support nonprofits through grants on Get Out the Vote or voter turnout. And what they really are is they're just leftists. Vote production machines, and they do this all over the place around our state. And they'll set up these events where everybody brings their ballot, and then they give you suggestions on how you should fill that ballot out. I've sent people to these events a number of times, and that's basically what they're doing. They're giving you suggestions on how to fill them out. And well, you probably want to fill this, probably want to vote for that person. We don't usually see them filling out the ballots for somebody there. That is actually illegal to do that. But we do see them there telling them who to vote for and get that filled in and all that. So, but ballot harvesting is mostly just collecting that all together and then getting it out. Well, I don't know what Semi-Bird's feelings are on it, but most of us don't like it. It's just the way that the rules are set up in the state right now. Jason, you got a question here. Hope you're doing well. I hope you have a Merry Christmas. When is the last day to submit new bills for next year? And you see the preemption repeal bill? And do you see the preemption repeal bill passing? Okay, so early submission of bills to the legislature by legislators started a little while ago here in December, and it kind of goes through, I don't know the exact date, but it's going to be probably sometime in February. It'll be the last day to submit a bill. It might be late. I think it's got to be in February. I don't know the date. I have to look it up. But there is a window of time when new bills can be submitted. Also, bills that didn't go anywhere last year can still be kind of revived, for lack of a better term, in this legislative session that's going on right now. So you could see some stuff like that kind of come out of the woodwork. I don't know on the preemption bill, the preemption repeal bill, and what that one is essentially is to allow local jurisdictions to create their own rules, and particularly the reason why Jason's asking here has to do more with Second Amendment issues, the right to defend yourself. there had been a requirement in Washington State that basically the gun laws would be consistent around the state, and that you couldn't just make up some crazy rule yourself in one jurisdiction and then have this patchwork of rules that you would have to try to follow depending on what part of the state you're in. So preemption, of course, they don't like that. They, being the left, doesn't like it. They would certainly want you to be harmed by criminals as easily as they can possibly make it for criminals to hurt you. So they don't want you to have the ability to defend yourself, and they don't want to make it easy for you to defend yourself. So they want to make all these laws really confusing. So that's why they have a preemption, a repeal of the preemption bill. I don't know if that's something that they're going to pass this year. It doesn't seem like it, but we'll see. So it's just worth paying attention to out there. I mean, there's a lot of crazy bills that get proposed in the legislature that aren't going anywhere. You're only looking at the most 10% of these bills ever even get to the floor. So most of them aren't going to go anywhere. And it's a short session, so it may not go, even fewer of them may go through this time. Scenaria, Frankenstein. I like the name. Love the parody music video. It's something even a lib might watch. I hope so. What's the general consensus on giving cash to these supposedly homeless beggars hanging out in street corners and strip malls? Well, I don't know if there's a general consensus on it, but I'll tell you the same thing that everybody else who's got any common sense knows. If you're going to give them cash, then you're just simply supporting their drug habit. And that's it. So if you just want to help them kill themselves sooner, give them money. That's what'll happen. When I used to live in New York City as a college student, even the liberal kind of left-leaning groups that cared about trying to get people off drugs, they used to tell us very openly, do not give these people cash. And I was at Columbia, and so there were people, for me to get from my off-campus dorm just to my classroom every day, I had to dodge 5 to sometimes 10 of these guys on the way to class every day. It got better under Giuliani, but when I was there in the Dinkins administration, it was a complete nightmare. You had to fight through these people trying to put on cons and trying to beg you for money. And of course, new students that came to campus got ripped off all the time. Once you've been there a little while, you figured out the game. But I always appreciate the fact that many of these genuine outreach groups would tell us explicitly, please do not give money to anybody who's begging for it on the street, because all you're doing is promoting their drug addiction habit. They don't do that so much anymore because they don't want to admit that they're pretty much all drug addicts or mentally troubled people. But that's just what you're doing. So I don't know about a consensus on it, but that's what really is happening. And obviously, you're not going to help anybody by giving them money, cash, for them just to simply shoot up or take meth or whatever it is their drug of choice happens to be. Rex, you got a question. Will Christmas be realized as more important than Governor Insley and Attorney General Bob Ferguson? Merry and meaningful Christmas, everyone. Well, obviously it's more important than either one of those guys, and it's clearly going to outlast both of them and their political careers, and even the damage that they decide to do to the state as they're here. But that's where it is. So let's see. One Yankee says, it's a clown show worldwide. Yes, it is. We are governed by clowns and corrupt people all across the country and the world. And there's just a lot of work to do to get that fixed. Thomas Kaufman, you got a question. Is there any hope of regaining a conservative majority? Sure there is. And I'm going to tell you, I remember distinctly being in Washington State when I came back from as a college student. I came back home, and I remember going into 1994, and it surprised me as much as it surprised anybody else. And I was in my early 20s, but to get this complete change in Washington State legislature from Democrat to Republican that nobody expected, it was actually a complete shock to the establishment. It was so shocking. I mean, nobody saw it coming. Nobody. The Republicans can pretend all they want to look back and say it was some kind of grand plan. It wasn't. The Republican Party was no more competent back then than they've ever been, but it was just they accidentally won. And what do you do with accidental victory when you aren't prepared for it? Well, you kind of squander it, which is generally what the Republicans did in the 90s, as they wasted their opportunity when they got into some level of control in the state legislature. To be fair, they did have to fight with some pretty bad Democrat governors, but they also did make some changes and fixes back then. And people forget about it looking back, but there were changes they made, especially to the criminal code. There were changes they made to budgeting. There were a lot of changes that were made when the Republicans had a majority, and they also clearly stopped a lot of stupid ideas from coming out of Olympia. But generally, if you don't have a good plan or a real plan to succeed, and you're always perpetually crying in your beer and presuming that you're just going to be a loser, or you're addicted to losing, then there is not going to be any plan for success in the future if that's kind of your attitude. So you can, and there is a reasonable chance that they could happen. Whether it happens in 2024 or not, I can't tell, but we'll see. Until they make crime, okay, Nightwolf got a point. Until they make crime a crime again, the shenanigans will continue. Mail-in voting. How the hell do we let that go through? Okay, well, we're rehashing the history on this one, but Washington State has been an all mail-in voting state since 2011. It was not overnight. I think most people are forgetting about this, and I don't know why. Listen, I'm as guilty as anybody. I remember when in the 90s you had to apply for a it was a permanent. You basically had to apply for an absentee ballot if you weren't going to be there. And I traveled a ton. I had work that I was either traveling to Asia a lot on, or I was traveling around the country a lot. And I mean, sometimes I'd be gone for almost a month just bouncing around. I was single, and I had a lot of presentations to do. And so I was doing startup company work, or I worked for a manufacturing company, depending on what years we're talking about. And I remember having to go to a precinct to vote. And then I remember thinking, oh, it's so much easier if I can just get an absentee ballot, which I did. And then sometime in the late 90s, I don't remember the year now, you could get permanent absentee, which I thought was a godsend because I was traveling all the time. And so like everybody else out there, I was lazy, and I realized, oh, this is great, I can vote this way. The funny thing is, mail-in voting was generally opposed at the time by Democrats because the majority of people who did it were busy people who were working, and so it was oftentimes people who couldn't be bussed down to the precinct, and so that tended to be majority Republican. So it used to be when you would look at election returns, the mail-in votes that were coming in later were Republican. It wasn't until they realized that they could go all mail-in voting and they could manipulate the ballots behind the scenes, or they do all kinds of things with the voter rolls where you lose chain of custody, and there's all kinds of other issues that introduces. That was when the Democrats in Washington State suddenly became super enthusiastic about it and pushed for the all mail-in voting program. But it didn't officially happen until 2011. There were a lot of small steps in that direction that occurred along the way. If you want to repeal it, you're probably going to have to take small steps going back to restore some level of accountability, which is the most realistic path to take right now. Or you always could have something happen at a more of a federal level, I think, like a court case that comes out and just recognizes some of the clear deficiencies with mail-in voting, lack of chain of custody, the collapse of the post office, all kinds of other issues that could come into play and change that. But I don't see it happening right away. And so if you use that as the excuse why you don't do anything now, then you're part of the problem, not the solution. But it is something that needs to be fixed for sure. Let's see. Yeah, one Yankee says, who wants either party anymore? Yeah, I mean, you could say that. I mean, it's a lazy way to say it, and I don't disagree that there's problems with both parties. But at the same time, you have a binary choice for the most part, not completely, but for the most part, you have a binary choice when you're voting, particularly in the top two state, where there has to be some sort of relevance to the average person as to where you stand somehow on the political spectrum. And just because somebody has an R next to their name, it doesn't make them instantly a liberty and freedom oriented person. But if you care about liberty and freedom, you're certainly not going to vote for a Democrat. It doesn't mean that there might be some Democrats left somewhere out there who aren't completely insane, but not many, and that number's dwindling fast. And it's not because of that number's dwindling because they're attacked by the left so viciously that they leave the Democrat Party and they become Republican or independent, whatever people want to call it. So this isn't a red yay blue team. It's not a red blue discussion here on the show. I'll deal with people individually, but for the most part, they need to know where somebody stands. So anyway, that's how we're going. at this point in time. So when a superstar party suddenly appears out of the woodwork, cares about liberty and freedom tomorrow, and they're actually organized and not a clown show of weirdos. We're all a little weird, I guess, but maybe when that happens, there'll be another party that people can talk about. Andrea K. Saw a flyer advertising a state ID issuing event at our public library in Spokane for homeless people. How on earth are they verifying their identities? More grant grifting, probably. Yeah, usually it's a great fraud operation that they run there. They don't bother to figure out who they are at all. In fact, people who've registered homeless to vote don't check their IDs either. They usually don't have identification. And I have no idea how they actually figure it out. I mean, one of the grant grifting operations that goes on, and just to give you a little bit of backstory on this, and it happens everywhere, that homeless services are provided to these people. So generally, you got a lot of drug addicts and mental patients there, and oftentimes they qualify for different types of state assistance. And so what happens is these grant recipients, these companies, entities, nonprofit, they get set up. What they do is they find a way to help navigate that individual who mentally is probably either too stoned out of their mind most of the time, too much of a criminal, or just too mentally handicapped to be able to get through all that process to get the money that the state or the feds or whoever get that they qualify for. And so what they do is they, being the nonprofit, once they get that money for that person, they act as the bank. So they receive that money first. And then they use that money on behalf of the individual. And this is where I think a lot of fraud occurs with these nonprofits, is that who the heck is actually verifying that money even gets to that person at the end of the day? Obviously, if they just give them cash, they're just going to go out and use it to buy more drugs, which they do. But maybe they need to use it for medical services. But nobody audits this stuff at all. Nobody's paying attention. Nobody cares in government. They just care about whether the money gets kicked out. And then it's just, and they get it. They're allowed a certain percentage that they can take for overhead costs or other things. And this is how the grant grifting operation works. That's what we're seeing out there today, and I think you're seeing a lot more than people realize. Let's see. Yeah, government is now spelled grift. It is, and it's probably worse than most people realize. Jason, is there a legal tram being set up to prevent Washington State from throwing out all the ballot measures like they did the car tabs? I'm assuming you mean legal team. And the answer to that is yes. I mean, the whole point is, so there's a little thing that you can do if you want to be involved in. There's a process that they have behind the scenes at the auditor's office where the state auditor's office, where they're going through right now. They get all these initiatives turned in and they approve the sheets of initiatives. They might reject an initiative sheet because there's something wrong on it, for example. And you have the opportunity to appeal that rejection. You being presumably the Let's Go Washington people, but I'm actually a little bit less clear on how that works. I kind of want to learn this a little bit because it's a wonkish kind of activism kind of thing that I just want to learn more about. And so I'm presuming that a citizen can somebody can volunteer to be an observer there and then engage to challenge their rejection. And I just want to do that for fun. So I'm hoping to kind of get into one of these training classes and go and do that myself. But they have the potential they can reject a signature. Now it looks like, frankly, they have so many signatures that no matter, and they've vetted and audited and pre-scanned most of these signatures. So I would anticipate that they're going to be fine as far as getting through the threshold. And that's your first hurdle that you have to go through. So between now and then when the Secretary of State formally signs off, you got the threshold of going through it and saying, yes, these are valid signatures. And you got plenty of them. And so therefore we'll submit it to the legislature. That's the first step. So I anticipate them getting through that. So even though they probably don't need the signatures that badly that are being potentially rejected, I think it's good behavior and habit and experience to go through and just challenge everything that the Secretary of State claims and fight over it there just for fun and experience. So I'm hoping to get involved in doing that. Then the question is, okay, it goes through. There are some games the legislature can play, but they're mostly limited to one. It's a one-trick pony option for them, which is that they can put an alternative on the ballot, so you'll have more than one choice. So and it's going to be the Democrats that would do this. The Democrats will say, oh my God, we're going to lose $1.5 billion out of our grant grifting operation for the climate change scam tax that we were imposing with Insley on gas. and we jacked up everybody's fuel prices, and it's just so much money coming into us. We certainly don't want that to go away. So they're going to provide some alternative that maybe moderates how much scam tax they take away from everybody. That might be something that they try in the legislature. But then the next question comes, you got to vote on it. I anticipate that they'd run a pretty big campaign trying to defeat the initiatives. Of course they will. And they're very popular, so that's not going to be easy. It will cost money for them to do that. And then the final step would be they'll legally challenge it after they're passed. All of these have gone through a pretty extensive legal review before they were put on the ballot, or I should say before they started collecting signatures. And, technically they've been reviewed by tons of attorneys, but obviously when there's that much money on the line, and as corrupt as Washington State judges certainly are, and especially at the state Supreme Court level, listen, they can always make those challenges. I don't think it's going to be that easy for them, especially for them to do it very much. But that's a fight you have to plan ahead of time and be prepared to fight. And I'm being told that they have legal teams ready to go. So we'll see. So that's what I've heard anyway, and that's what I'm aware of at this point in time. Let's see. Angelique, question here. Can anyone volunteer to help count votes next year? Don't want to mail in vote. Okay. A couple parts of that question. Can you volunteer? Actually, you can get hired by your local auditor's office to be a temporary worker involved in the vote counting process behind the scenes. And actually, I encourage as many people as possible to do jobs like that. If you're curious, you're interested, and you want to know how it works, that's a great job to get. If you just want to volunteer and observe, you have to do that differently. And you do usually have to do that through a party where you say, okay, I'm going to observe as a Republican, or I'm going to observe as a Democrat. You can technically observe as a League of Women Voters person, but that's just like another Democrat. There's really nothing different there. And you can go do it that way. And you're not really counting the votes. You're just observing them counting the votes, and you're doing it. And that's something. Those are two different ways that you can get involved in this at a much closer level. Otherwise, right now, we can't do anything about mail-in voting under the law at this point in time. TZ Burton, this weekend, Brandy Cruz reported on signature gatherers getting harassed by a shopper at Costco. What crime did she commit, and how do we ensure, is what I'm assuming you mean, signature gathering is safe? Well, it's hard to ensure that signature gathering be safe, mostly because if you're a conservative and if you're gathering signatures for a conservative cause, then the rules will be very different than if you're gathering signatures for a lefty-leaning cause, because the Attorney General and most of the law enforcement agencies that are set up in our state are hyper-partisan and very biased in their enforcement of the law, and they're very selective in what they'll enforce. So I think if you went out and you were harassing some leftist cause signature gatherer, then I think you get prosecuted. If you harass a conservative cause or tax-reducing cause signature gatherer, then you probably can get away with it. And the case you're talking about here, actually, in Costco, that Brandy Cruz documented, was this gal that came up and she tried to destroy the whole sheet of signature gathering, and then she went in the store. They were able to follow her, get photos. I mean, the whole thing's documented, right? That's what she does. Like most leftists, they just can't help themselves. They're violent by nature. They're controlling by nature. They have to control and attack everybody around them who doesn't agree with them. And so that's kind of the nature of the left. It's always been that way. So not a surprise. They love central planning, love central control. That's why they like that. So she was doing that at Costco. And there is a specific law that says you're not supposed to, I don't have it memorized, but there's a statute. I thought Brandy Cruz identified it in her reporting. I thought she did. But if she didn't, I think it's on the Let's Go Washington site. You'll hear it. Tim Eyman has talked about it before in the past. Other people who have been involved in the signature gathering world have talked about it. It is a law. You're not supposed to harass them like that. But again, it's Washington, and the left there's a different set of rules for them than there is for the rest of us. Cristiano Suzuki, you got a question here about what's the law around using less lethal ammunition. I don't think it's less than lethal ammunition. I think it's less than lethal things like pepper spray or pepper balls or what do they call them? They basically are bags that shot bags that help stop somebody but don't kill them, or at least they're not supposed to. for the police. And there were some changes in that law that actually reduced police's the law enforcement's option to go to less than lethal ammunition or choices like tear gas and other things like that they would want to use to try to prevent a riot from getting out of control or something like that. There were a lot of unintended consequences from the law. I thought they watered down some of that stuff as the clowns who wrote the law started to realize just what it was going to do, and I think they eventually came around to changing some of it, but I'm not familiar with where it's currently at. It's a good question to ask. I'm going to ask some of the people, but anyone, I like that question, Cristiano. TZ Burton, that was a good song. Everybody should go sub to her. Yes to Abby London. Please go subscribe to her channel. She's awesome. Please make sure you do that. Jason, you got a question here. Is the Ukraine boondoggle coming to an end? What country will Zelensky flee to? Well, I don't know. I mean, listen, America spends a shocking amount of money on adventures overseas, and that's been true for a long time. It seems to be increasing both in tempo and cost as a percentage of GDP, or this overall amount of money that we're giving to a lot of countries, whether it's Syria, whether it's other places all around the world. And even, I probably, if in college, I would have defined myself as a more pro-intervention kind of guy when socialism and communism was around, and that I was always concerned about that a little bit. But we can't be fighting all these crazy war. Every single war in the world is a big mistake if you're going to engage that way, I think. That doesn't mean you're going to be isolationist. It just means it's not a good idea to throw so much of your treasure into other people's fights all over the place. And unfortunately, Ukraine was very corrupt, and so a lot of that stuff gets stolen. A lot of problems related to the whole fight that's going on over there. I do think, and to some extent, especially the more we read about it, and with some of even the direct contacts with Biden and his son and everything to Ukraine, there's a weird relationship going on out there. Obviously, Russia's in the wrong to invade the country, and we'll see. Unfortunately, I got a feeling there's a lot that's been covered up and caught up in propaganda, and we won't know where we're really at for a while. Critical conservative for a hope story. Look at Florida. Well, Florida is just a state that's turned around. I mean, it was a purple state for a long time. Who knows how they would vote. It's become very conservative there. So. The Night Wolf, I moved here in 1989. Good old days, I guess. Yeah, it's funny. Democrat governing then, if I recall, was Locke. No, that wasn't Locke back then. If you moved here in 89, now I'm forgetting the actual last person. I made a mistake. I've actually made a couple mistakes on my live stream that I've been corrected on later, and it's funny. They stick in my mind because I try not to make too many mistakes. One of them was when I said the last Republican governor, and I believe it's Spellman. Now I'm going to make my mistake again, but I believe it was Spellman. And then basically after him, we had Booth Gardner, if I remember right. And so if you moved here in 89, I think Booth Gardner was your governor at the time. Another mistake, by the way, I made was had to do with Arizona attorneys not needing a bar license. And I was wrong. You need a bar license in every state. There was something about Arizona, I think it had to do with pro se litigants or something that was different, because I've done pro se litigants where I represent myself. And I remember there was something unique about Arizona, and I somehow conflated that with whether you need a bar license or not down there. So that was another mistake I'd made in the past. Months later, I'm correcting it now in a live stream, but I know that was a live stream mistake that I made. All right, so let's see. Video for I don't know what that is. TZ Burton, what are your thoughts on Jay Insley's meltdown on being called out on his carbon tax affecting low income? And can we get this law reversed? Yeah, I mean, this is funny. Jay Insley has just been more buffoonish than normal lately. And I attribute a little bit this is one thing to remember. Okay, so Jay Insley, this is his third term, right? He's not going for a fourth. As much as that might have been fun to fight Insley over a fourth term, but he's not going for a fourth, which usually means he's found some greener pastures in some other way on the other side. So I don't know. He's probably got some gold goose that he's set up with one of the laws that they passed and signed with somebody to give him a nice fat paycheck when he's out of the governor's office. The problem is he is leaving the governor's office. So a lot of the staff that he has, some of whom have been with him now for a long time, they're deciding that they need to jump ship too. And they're not waiting until he leaves. Some of them are planning to jump earlier, and so they're already jumping. And so as the people flee the sinking Insley ship, mainly because he's a lame duck, he's nothing to offer them. They don't have any reason to really stick it out with him, so they're bailing. And as they go to leave him, they, a lot of the support structure that probably exists around the governor is not there anymore. And left to his own devices and his own statements, he's really not a very smart guy, and he does a lot of dumb things, and he says a lot of dumb things. I have friends of mine that grew up with him. They've known him since he was a kid. So I'm just telling you, he's not the brightest guy out there, never has been, which is why he probably made a perfect Democrat governor. However, so here he is, he's bailing out, and then these are minor questions they were asking him about problems on his carbon tax scam. And the meltdown that he had at those press conferences, the last couple press conferences have been epic. I mean, if that was a Republican, you would have been called out on it. They would have called this guy out a long time ago. But because he's a Democrat, he gets away with just being a clown to the media, even in front of the media. And, they generally let him get away with it. But still, you can see they're recording him being an idiot and saying dumb things. So we'll see what happens. But we'll find out about it. Gregorius, Greg, or just keep watching, that's what I should say, because I got a feeling there's going to be more meltdowns from him in the future. Gregorius Greg, thank you for interviewing Mr. Byrd. Are you going to interview the other guy? It would be helpful for us voting public. Yeah, I'm actually planning on interviewing Dave Reichert. And I've met Semi Byrd more often than I've met Dave Reichert, just because Semi has been at a lot of events. He actually announced a year ago that he was running, so he's been out there a lot more. And I go to a lot of events, so we've been a lot of the same events. So we've had a chance to talk quite a bit over the last couple of years. I'm not endorsing anybody, and I've been pretty clear on that in the governor's race at this point in time. I don't want Ferguson in there. What sane human would? But I'm anybody who can get through the primary. I definitely want against Ferguson, whoever that is. That's who we need to have as governor. But Reichert, I just haven't had a chance to talk to him that much. I have talked to his campaign manager and made sure that it was clear that I'm offering to have them on the show at some point in time too, and I think that's fair. If I'm going to interview one Republican candidate, one conservative candidate, or at least a Republican candidate running in the same position before the primary, I think I should offer the other one as well. So I don't do a lot of interviews. I've generally tried to avoid doing too many candidate interviews, and just because it would take up a lot of time, and it really does. But since I did it with Semi, and a lot of people were asking me to do that on the show, and I do try to respond if I can, then I'm happy to interview Reichert as well. And actually, I would kind of consider the other Democrat that's running for office there as well. I don't know why I'm blanking on his name right now. Mark Mullet, in the 5th legislative district, only because I actually do know him personally. It goes back a number of years. His dad was actually mayor of Tukwila, and even though there's a lot of policy differences that I would have with him, I think he'd be an interesting person. I just saw him at the Farm Bureau state meeting a while ago. And I've been open about this, I don't think he has a great shot at coming through the primary, but I'd be open to also do an interview with him if he was anywhere near the studio. So there's no way I'm going to interview Ferguson, as fun as that would be. But who knows? Maybe we'll see. You never know what the future's going to hold. Let's see. Julie Trim. Oh, no. Sorry, TG Burton question. Julie Tim, CEO of Sound Transit, stepped down and still getting paid. Can we stop these people from getting paid for not working for the people? Well, if you're going to stop paying bureaucrats who aren't working for the people, then we'd have to stop paying almost everybody who works in government today. Julie Tim is probably doing us a favor by leaving and not being involved. Unfortunately, we can't do that to all of them. And there's somebody there squandering our resources and money in her place. But it would be nice if we didn't squander our taxpayer dollars on people like this. I agree. And that one is worth digging into. I don't know. I mean, they like to waste our money. That's just this is how they do it. So let's see. There's a question here. Scenario, you said they did not even ask to look at my son's ID when I took him to register to vote in Lewis County, and I was astonished. Well, I'm sorry you're astonished, but you're right. They don't. They should, but they don't. So that's that's just how it goes. I wish they did. Great sit down with Mr. Bryce Carter got a question here. Great sit down with Mr. Byrd. My question to you is it just me, or does the Yakima County Republican Party group doesn't seem very enthusiastic or active with trying to garner public? I don't know what that question is. So if you're going to ask me a question, make it be a question, because that isn't a question. Let's see. Okay, I think you're trying to fill it in with the next statement. When I lived in Lodi, the San Joaquin Republican Party was great at drumming up enthusiasm. Well, you'll just have to get enthusiastic with the Yakima Republicans if they're not doing what you hope they would do. So anyway, Zay, that's not a question. Let's keep going down here. Nightwolf. Yeah, Booth Gardner. Had to look it up, though. Yes. So I was right. It was Booth Gardner when you were in there in 89. Rock E. Shepard. Are you a Zionist? Oh, that's a funny one. I haven't anybody ask a question to me about that. A Zionist. Well, I'm not Jewish, so I don't know that you have to be that to be a Zionist. That's a funny question. Do you support Israel generally? I do. But it's funny about Zionists. I don't really think about that question much. It used to come up when I was in college. In fact, it's very similar, I think, to today. And as somebody who's not Jewish, but who supports Israel, the question of whether you're a Zionist or not has always been a funny one to me. So I don't even really know what a Zionist is for sure, at least as you apply that question to somebody who isn't Jewish. And so that's just a funny one. Nobody's asked that question before. So who asked that? Rock E. Shepard. Actually, two people did. Laura Berry and Rock E. Shepard. Okay. Well, thank you guys for asking me a question that has not been asked before, and one that I actually had to think about, but it's just kind of funny. Here's a question from Rock E. Shepard. Are a lot of the unlawful immigrants locating in Washington? Yeah, I mean, the answer to that is yes. Of course, many are, particularly... I mean, listen, Washington State's always sort of been a vector for illegal immigrants for quite some time, long before it was cool, mostly because there were a lot of jobs, particularly in the fields in eastern Washington. When on one side of my family, we've been in Washington State forever, but on the other side of my family, they came over in like the 30s, and or at least a chunk of them came over in the 1930s. And one of the things they did during the Great Depression is they would go pick hops in eastern Washington, because there were a lot of farm jobs, seasonal, but they were seasonal over there, and they would go pick hops. And so that's, my family had stories of going over the mountains. I think it was my great-grandfather at the time was thinking about homesteading Alaska. And so he left the family in a tent, actually in Seattle, in somebody's yard, and then they decided to pack it into their car, which I think they had like a Model T, and they drove it back over the pass, which wasn't paved back then, by the way. A little interesting history on that. And they picked hops, and I think they did it over in Yakima. I might be right. It could have been Wenatchee, but I think it was Yakima area. I have to go back and look at family history. But so later on, when they were using more migrant labor to do that, it became a lot more common for non-U.S. citizens to come up to, especially eastern Washington. But you had the berry fields in Skagit County. You had some dairy operations. You had even some timber work. There were a lot of different places where you'd see a lot of non-American citizens go there, sometimes with green cards and work permits, sometimes without, to do work. So generally, the trend has been that, especially in those rural areas, you would have illegal immigrants coming in there to take advantage of the same type of work, because a lot of it used to be piecework, and it was a little bit easier, I think, to hire people who weren't U.S. citizens to do that type of work. And now, once the sanctuary city kind of world came into play and it became cool to violate the law and the unions didn't matter anymore, or they certainly don't care about how much you make, then they're basically going to be... there's going to be plenty of them here, and especially with the human trafficking that goes on in Washington, and especially in the Seattle area, and the drug pipeline that goes through Washington, you're just going to have a lot more illegal immigrants here. Cristiano, you got a question here. The Pope just announced his church will start blessing gay union. Does it surprise you? Well, what this Pope does doesn't surprise me. It surprises me a little bit the Catholic Church would go along with that, and it's one of the weaknesses, in my opinion, of having Listen, people are always going to, men in general are always going to be the fallible link in anything. So if you put a leftist in charge of something, or somebody who seems to be that way, then they're just going to go down whatever path that the leftism has told them they need to go down to. Cristiano, you got a question. Have you ever been to Renton? Sure. In fact, technically, where I used to live, where I grew up, was in Renton. It's Newcastle today, but back when I was growing up, we called it Renton, and that was our old farm, and that was actually my grandparents' second farm, east on the kind of up off Cemetery Road and Jones Hill Road. That was called Renton as well. So I spent a lot of time in Renton. Still go back all the time in Renton, so I don't know why you're asking that question, but it's definitely a place I've spent a lot of time in. Teresa, you got a question here. What are the chances? Oh, what are the changes? I think you mean chances of Bob and Jay being brought up on some treason charges. Well, zero. There's no chance at all. For somebody to be brought up on treason charges, let's think about this. So I don't know who puts these stories out there, and if people don't understand this yet, I hate to be the guy to tell you that there's no Santa Claus or Easter Bunny, but let me do that right now. There is no plan. I'm sorry. There's no smart group of people planning to save the country. There isn't. Nowhere. That's a lie. Somebody's making up those lies so that they can convince you to fall asleep at the switch and believe that somehow there's a savior that's going to come down and save you. That's not how it's going to work. It doesn't work that way. And really, it never has. What happens is people just have to do it themselves. And when you step involved, take responsibility, don't presume there's some miracle guy or crew out there mysteriously organizing something behind the scenes. It isn't happening. That's not happening. So this is where these treason charges come up. Corrupt and dishonest politicians like Bob and Jay are a dime a dozen and as common as rain in our history and all around the world. It is rare. It's exceedingly rare. It's almost impossibly rare to think of anybody bringing up treason charges for them, no matter how bad they are as politicians. It's not going to happen. It's like people presuming that somehow justice on earth is going to happen the way that you imagine and you want it to be. It isn't how it works. It'd be nice if we could get things a little bit better where we didn't have such obvious corrupt people in office, but that's just a rare thing. And treason charges are not going to probably be part of it. Can we get rid of dual citizenship? This is a question by Rock E. Shepherd, and the answer to that is unlikely. Dual citizenship has been around a long, long time, and I don't think that's likely to happen. It's actually increasing in popularity today. So dual citizenship has actually been driven to some extent more recently just by a lot of Americans who think, I want to get a citizenship in another country in case America becomes unsafe or unfree, and I want an ability to go somewhere else. I don't really know where you think you're going to go. It's going to be much safer, but dual citizenship's just been around a long time, and it probably is more beneficial for people from other countries than it is for Americans, but even in America, it's become more popular. Let's see. Slade Gordon, by the way, T.Z. Burton, I saw you remember Slade Gordon running. He was actually the last Republican. He was not the last Republican to win a major office, but he was the last Republican federal senator, and I believe he lost in 2000, if I remember right. Let's see. Can we get rid of birthright citizenship? Laura, this is a question you're asking. That is a federal question, and, in theory, I think you can. Will it be done? I don't know. And surprisingly, it's been brought up by Trump and some other people, so maybe it is something that there's actually some movement towards, but it would have to be done at the federal level. You can't do it at a local level. Golden Blades, I'm frustrated we don't have a younger conservative running for superintendent of public instruction who is really a viable challenger to Reichdahl. And actually, that's a good question. I plan on probably after the new year, I'll come back and start running down these other offices and talking about who's running for them, because there are some early people that have filed. The superintendent of public instruction got to be certainly low-hanging fruit for somebody who's willing to actually run a real campaign. If you don't have the ability to raise money and run a real campaign for that office, it's going to be very difficult for you to do anything. Chris Reichdahl is going to have a lot of union money. And in many ways, Chris Reichdahl has been the greatest poster child to promote homeschooling and private schooling of any OSPI, Office Superintendent of Public Instruction person in a long, long time. Under his direction, public education costs more than it ever has in human history in our state, and the kids are doing worse than they've ever been recorded doing. So congratulations, Reichdale. You've done an incredible job destroying public education by every measurable standard, with the exception of the one that he's going to use the most, which is the increase in money. And, of course, the answer and the solution in Reichdale's world is, okay, he's destroyed public education every way he can. He wants to keep destroying it, dumbing it down as much as possible, but he needs a lot more of your taxpayer dollars to do that. That's his whole plan. It's amazing how egregiously incompetent and just horrible the public education system's become. My wife's a teacher. I mean, listen, I know, and it's comparatively to where many of the public schools are in the States, probably a better school district than normal. Disastrous, though. And you need somebody that's brave and willing and articulate and capable of communicating effectively, I think, to run against Chris Reichdale. And it does help if you have a younger person doing it. It's just because they're going to be more dynamic. But you need somebody that is pretty aware of all the problems that exist with the education system today and have reasonable, workable solutions or transitions on how to address some of those issues moving forward. We just need we do need good people running for all these statewide offices. It makes it easier to get good people elected if good people run. Got a question here from Zay. Washington State has become too expensive to Growth Management Act and due to lefts in the last 10 years. What's your take? Well, the Growth Management Act back in 1990 is a complete disaster. I mean, the central planning in general will always fail and make things miserable. But for those who support it, the failures are a feature, not a bug. Wealthy elitists love central planning because it increases the value of their investment by artificially reducing the amount of land available for development of any kind, and they like that, and so they hide it behind the fear of urban sprawl, all kinds of things, and so that's simply what drives up the price of housing. Other than that, they also love these central plan departments that just jack up the cost for no reason. There's no group of people more incompetent or dishonest than the people you're going to find in these central planning departments in various counties and cities around the state. They exist mostly to say no and to help make your life more miserable. That seems to be what they do. So it'd be nice if we actually, I would repeal the Growth Management Act if we could, and go to a much more rational approach and pretty much eliminate the fees that they charge for individual homes. If you would eliminate most of those and reduce the cost, which they've estimated somewhere around a couple $100,000 per home, you could really reduce the cost of homes and get them closer to what they actually cost to build and not the big overhead inflated fake costs that get added onto it later. Let's see. There's another question down here, Jack. Do you believe cheap labor really ever has had a net benefit to the public at large? Good question. Generally, no. I don't think cheap labor is something that you should have as an objective of society. I think labor finds its own level, right? If labor becomes too expensive, then people inevitably innovate to come up with solutions and approaches to reduce the amount of labor that you need to do whatever unit of value or production that you're working on. I remember being up in the berry fields in Skagit County, Sakuma berries, if I remember correctly, was where I was touring their fields. And that was actually the farm and the location where they developed the first machine and kind of computerized control picking system for blueberries and raspberries, is what I remember, which were very labor intensive up until that point in time. And they were kind of like these U-shaped machines that went down the rows, and they would shake the berries and collect them. And then they had this automated system that would, on these conveyor belts, and they would use optical scanning and sorting to sort the berries, and they eliminated a whole bunch of jobs for that. The reason for doing that was the increasing cost of labor and also the unreliability of labor that they were running into at the time. And they had to start coming up with solutions one way or the other. And cheap labor might have been able to prevent that automation, but eventually I think automation and most of this types of the automation like this is good most of the time. So you find solutions, and that actually creates different types of jobs. And so I think you're always going through this process. artificially inflating the amount of illegal immigrants in particular to the country is going to be a downward pressure on, it increases inflation, and it's a downward pressure on the availability of lower cost work, entry level work. I was a dishwasher for a period of time when I was younger. I worked in a cabinet shop. I shoveled manure. I laid sod. I did a lot of mowing lawns. I did all that kind of stuff when I was younger because there were job opportunities available for me to take, and they paid enough that I thought that was a worthwhile thing to do, which seems to be less common today. And reducing the cost of labor artificially isn't, I don't think it's that good because it makes it hard for somebody to live. I think it's going to find its level, where it's at. One of the problems that the left oftentimes has when they talk about labor in particular is they obsess about somebody who's in a minimum wage job in one capacity or another, and they say, okay, we need to artificially inflate the minimum wage right now. And it's based on the presumption that person will never advance in life, that they're at the plane that they're at now and it's never going to change, which is really counter to the experience that almost everybody's had in America, that you have a job. Just because I had a dishwashing job at one point in time in my life didn't mean I was going to be a dishwasher or plan to be a dishwasher for the rest of my life. It was a job that I took to make some money. I was a truck driver for a while one summer. That didn't mean I was going to be a commercial truck driver for the rest of my life. When I was building cabinets, I loved it. I enjoyed the skill. I liked learning how to do it, but it wasn't like I was going to be a cabinet builder for the rest of my life. Or a lot of other jobs that I had along the way. It's kind of silly and ridiculous and absurd and just irrational to believe that people are always going to be stuck there. And yet that's the approach the left always takes. You're there and you're going to stay there forever. Same with apartment, like living in an apartment complex. I've doorbelled apartment complexes before and talked to people who live there. Never met anybody living in an apartment complex that comes out and tells me, man, I'm living the dream and I don't want to move. I'm right where I want to live right now and I never want to be anywhere else. No one's ever said that, ever. When I've doorbelled an apartment complex. I've had people tell me that at homes before, many times, many times when I've visited people in their homes. They said, I'm going to live here till the day I die, or this is my dream home, or I finally got to where I want to be. I've had people tell me that in their homes many times. Nobody ever says that in an apartment complex. So what does the left want to do? The left wants to shove as many people in apartment complexes and then say that's how everybody wants to live. 15-minute walkable city. I mean, just, it's a place you go to live while you're trying to save money to go somewhere else. I've lived in apartments before myself when I was out of college. And when I was in college too. It's not like, oh, that's the only place I'm going to live from now on. But there's a weird angle that the left has, trying to convince people that they want you to be as low down the totem pole as you can and stay there forever. Let's see. Sorry, that was I'm way off topic on that one. So thoughts on the Biden Christmas Hunger Games video? Yeah. And the Senate sex tape leaked. Are the adults back in the room? Oh, that's a good question. That is actually kind of funny. The Hunger Games video that he's referring to there is the weird Christmas video that the Bidens put out. And it was just a leftist dance troupe dressed up in weird ways. And it did kind of nominally look like Hunger Games sort of costumes, and they're dancing around the Christmas tree. And it was silly, right? I'm actually less bothered by that. It's a little eccentric. You'd have to be a New York dance into that dance scene to probably appreciate it more. And I'm sure she's just showing off how awesome and sophisticated the Bidens are. And cool and hip, maybe. I don't know. Maybe that's what they thought they were getting out of that one. The Senate sex tape is a little different situation, of course, because, Lauren Boebert was raked over the coals by every single media outlet in America because of the groping incident that they had supposedly recorded by cameras in darkened, was a movie theater or a play or something that they were going to. And so, and now this video, this gay sex video tape thing, inside of a Senate chamber room by a Democrat staffer, of course, is, it's just more about why do people need to film themselves doing this stuff? I don't quite get that. I don't know why they think that's awesome, but nevertheless they do, and they seem to like getting it out there. That's the modern times. So I just think it's ridiculous. You got a question here, Golden Blades, Building Act impacting schools, and the answer, I'm assuming you say Building Act, you're talking about the reduction of available land. It's the Growth Management Act, and the answer is yes, it does. It makes the cost of schooling, of course, go up quite a bit, or the the cost of building new schools, and it increases their cost quite a bit. Jason, why has Colorado moved left? So far left, they actually vote on the left of Washington now. Is it all from the California liberals moving to Denver? You're also seeing Colorado Springs move left. No, the answer there is actually had more to do with a longer campaign that began irrespective of the number of Californians moving in. And it was really an aggressive campaign by the left to change the laws on how they vote. Colorado also has mail-in voting. I actually think Colorado's more left than Washington, and you mentioned that there, but I mean, in many ways they are right now. But these things do change, and there are ways to change it, but you have to get out there and actually get to work with a longer-term plan, and I've never seen the Republicans have that. So it'll have to be other groups that decide they want to engage and care about changing the nature of the community that they're in and educating them about the self-destructive and just totally destructive policies the left pushes. Rock, you got a question. Can we live without using our Social Security numbers? Well, the answer to that is no, you can't generally. At least it's not easy to live legally that way. You can probably get around a little bit, but not as much as you think. Great question here by Cristiano. What are your New Year's resolutions? To be fair, I haven't even made any, but I will tell you a couple of them that I think I will have just off the top of my head. I want to do some more parody videos, so I hope you enjoyed my Christmas parody, and I'd like to do a lot more of them. Number two, I want to do a lot more long-form articles that I've been very deficient in articles this last year, and so I want to have more long-form articles about corruption cases in Washington State and really dig into that a little bit more, just get some good, meaty stories out there. I want to have my new Rumble channel kind of up and running as a parallel thing with my YouTube channel. Main reason for that is that just as the full-blown censorship machine really kicks into play, we really need to have these alternative options to go to. And I've seen so many other YouTube creators who depend on it. I mean, I don't really depend on YouTube for my day-to-day living, but a lot of people do. And so it makes a big difference if they think that was going to be their career, their income stream, and then it's all gone. I don't really care about the income stream side of it as much as I do care about the ability to get information out there. So that's a couple resolutions I have. I'd like to lose some weight. I'd like to hike a little bit more. I mean, those are things. Let's see. Rock, you got a question. Eastern Washington, North Idaho, East Oregon want to secede and join in the redoubt area as a new member of the Union. Is that feasible? Unlikely. I mean, it's a nice idea in the sense of creating a conservative area, but I don't find that path to be likely for success. But I don't think there's anything wrong with it. It's the same reason why I believe that the counties in Washington State should be, like King County should be broken up into probably 3 counties. It's probably very needed actually there. Snohomish County, similar story. Whatcom County, probably really similar. A number of counties in Washington could probably afford to be broken up to be a little bit smaller than they are now and more locally controlled. So I think there'd be benefits to that. And for the same reason that I think there are some benefits in reorganizing government around the will of the people that live there. But it shouldn't be easy. You want to make it hard, and because it becomes confusing, and there's a lot of things you have to consider when you're just getting ready to do that. But the Eastern Oregon and the Eastern Washington kind of merger with Greater Idaho idea has been around for a long time, so they've thought through that one a little bit better than most. Oceana 23, question for Glenn. Did you see the new trailer for the movie Civil War? And what did you think of it? I haven't, and so I don't know, but I guess I'll have to go look. Go Wolverines, Rock. That's funny. I loved 1980. Anyway, that was I liked Red Dawn back in the day. Breaking bolts, and I realize I'm coming down. I'm going to try to rush these last questions here, guys. So, breaking bolts. Have you heard anything regarding conservative groups in Washington working with the Navy, Department of Defense, in buying up land around the region? No, I haven't. That's a new one for me. So maybe I've heard about it here first. Deanne Sanderson, I watched your interview with Semi Bird. Have you contacted Dave Reichert? I'd love to hear them debate. And the answer to that is I've contacted Dave Reichert's campaign. I did see Dave Reichert at one of the Let's Go Washington events where we turned in the police pursuit bill, not in Tumwater. I think I saw him up in shoreline where they did that event, the media event outside of the Dunn Lumber, where the bad guys had rammed it there. And so I did talk to him then. So he knows it's on. He's aware. I will interview him just to be fair, and I think I should, yes, if he's available. It is a little bit hard to schedule with me, so that's not his fault, and that's probably more mine. Let's see. Okay. Let's see. Breaking Bolts. Follow up with previous question. I recently had a plot of land purchased by me, which was well inland, away from any waterways or bases. Northwest Watershed Institute. Okay. I'm going to bounce down because I'm thinking what you're trying to do is make it into two different questions. Do you think conservation groups purchasing land around the state have any impact on the cost and availability of homes on the market? Okay, good. I'm going to put those two questions together. And the answer to that one is yes, they do. A lot of these grant grifting operations on the land conservation sort of side of things, they really create an interesting problem, because what they do is they take a bunch of previously taxable land, they make them nonprofit, therefore they take them off the tax roll so that there's no tax revenue gained by them. And if you understand how the property tax structure is set up, that doesn't change the underlying budget that the property supports. What it does, it shifts that tax burden to other people that are still paying taxes. So that's one way that it impacts the cost of land. Secondly, clearly it reduces the amount of land that can be used for development. A huge percentage of Washington state is off limits to any kind of building or construction at all. Massive, bigger than most states actually. So, or bigger than most small states. So yes, of course they're going to reduce it. And we already have the government that's done that tremendously with the Department of Natural Resources, national parks in our state, all kinds of other large set-asides from land that have already been there. So I do think there's some problem with that. I'm not a fan of what they're doing. I think they should be taxed. And I also think that they should be audited, because most of these conservation groups lie. They pretend like they're caring for the land, and they actually make the land worse. It's actually worse for them to own it than it was before they did, and they should be held accountable for it just the same way that a property owner would be if they decided to turn their property into tire dumping locations or fire hazards or noxious weed locations. They need to be required to maintain their land just like a private owner would be. Let's see, T.D. Burton question, do you think Maya Espinoza will run again for Superintendent of Public Instruction? I thought she was a good candidate. I don't know. I haven't talked to her. Next time I see her, though, I'll ask. I'm sure I won't be the only one. Laura Berry, East Washington, North Idaho, want us to secede and join. I think I already answered that question. Sorry. That was a previous question that I already answered. Let's see. Do you think okay, there we go. I'm going to be, let's see. Let me see about this. Yeah, T.Z. Burton, Georgia has 88 counties. Yeah, remember when the counties in the East were created, it was before, mostly before the invention of the automobile. So counties were generally smaller in order to govern them. And when you were trying to measure a county by the size of horseback riding, how far you could ride a horse, that's why if you look at some of these counties, they have huge, some of these Eastern America counties, I should say, the eastern states are just going to have a lot more counties, more than we do in the West. And so we have 39 counties, and obviously we're about the size of Georgia. So anyway, have you heard about New York letting illegals to vote? Yes, I have. Angelique, that was your question. Terrible idea. And yes, they're trying that also down in California. It is unconstitutional, but they're still trying to do it. Do you have contacts to find out what really is going on underground at the Ross complex in Vancouver? I probably have contacts. I've never looked into it. So Jason, is it a good idea to take a firearms class now to prepare for this permitting bill? Are there any Washington State Patrol approved courses? Great question. I always think taking more firearms classes is a great idea. I mean, I've taken a number of them and I didn't have to. I just thought they were useful. Are there any Washington State Patrol approved courses? That I don't know. My guess is there isn't. There are probably some other questions, but it looks like people are just simply commenting back and forth, and it's probably about the right time to end this live stream. So real quick in closing, guys. So this is my last live stream. I think actually until I said Christmas in the header here, but it's actually my last live stream, I believe, until January 2nd. I anticipate doing another live stream then. So if I don't see you sooner, Merry Christmas. Enjoy the holidays. Appreciate your family. Appreciate your loved ones. While you still have them. It's very easy to get too distracted in the political world and get depressed about the clowns and criminals that we have running government. But if you go back and study history, you will find you won't be the first generation who felt that way. So what matters, I think, is family and community and friends and the memories that you make now. And sometimes the memories in the holidays can be really good ones, especially if you pay attention to what's going on. So I am planning to be out in Leavenworth. Maybe I will see you out there. I know I'm taking some of the family out there. Haven't been out there in a long time. Used to go there all the time as a kid. I have a foreign exchange student from Germany at home right now, so it'd be kind of fun to take him out there, and you can laugh at Americans creating a fake Bavarian village in the mountains. I always thought that was funny. So hope all's well. I hope you enjoy my Christmas parody video. If you haven't seen it yet, please go on the channel, get it, share it widely. Obviously, it always has a shelf lifespan and a shelf, kind of a limited shelf life because it is a Christmas video. But it was a fun parody video to do anyway. And if you haven't done so already, go to Abby London's YouTube channel, subscribe to her channel, be a new subscriber. She's awesome. Plan on working with her more in the future if we can. She's a great singer and was able to do that just literally with almost no warning. We did it, the whole thing. My video guys with the editing and stuff, we did it just in a couple days. So I know we can do a better job than that, but it was just fun to put it together real quick. And I hope all's well. Hopefully you enjoy my next couple videos, the ones I recorded today. I should be launching them over the rest of this week. But otherwise, Merry Christmas. Hope your family's safe. Hope you enjoy the holidays, and we will see you in 2024.